All right, everybody. Thanks for coming today for your first breakout session. I am Professor Chris Jones. I'm an assistant professor here in Information Systems and also the director of the MS Information Systems graduate program as well. So it's my pleasure to be introducing Dave Cherry, who is going to be our speaker today. So a quick bio about Dave. Dave Cherry is a problem solver, executive, strategist, and speaker with over 30 years of experience working with clients from across industries to define customer experience strategy, enabled by innovation, technology, and informed by analytics. He's a member of the International Institute of Analytics Experts Panel, serves on the advisory board for Women in Analytics, and has guest lectured and taught courses at numerous universities. He is also the co-author of Analytics Interpreted, a compilation of perspectives. Dave has worked with and for leading organizations such as L Brands, Polo Ralph Lauren, Spicer, Ascenia Retail Group, Journeys, DSW, J. Jill, Disney, Alliance Data, Nationwide Insurance, AEP, Huntington Bank, Cardinal Health, Ohio Health, John Deere, Deloitte, Consulting and PricewaterhouseCoopers. He's got a lot of experience here. Yes, and he also holds a Bachelor's of Science in Economics with a dual degree in Finance and Law from the Wharton School from the University of Pennsylvania. So let's give him a round of applause.
I should have just popped this slide up while you were talking, Chris, because the longer you go, the more logos you throw up and just kind of shrink them down, and they get smaller every year as I get the opportunity to work with more and more clients. So first of all, thank you guys for showing up. About 15 minutes ago, I was in this room by myself. So I'm glad that you guys are here. I appreciate the opportunity back here at University of Cincinnati, speaking at the symposium for the third time. So thank you guys for having me. I want to start off with a question. Raise your hand if your organization has definitively achieved tangible value from analytics, from any kind of analytics project that you can quantify. So raise your hand if you've done that. Okay, there's a few hands down. That means we have to continue with the conversation. So I was figuring if we had all the hands up, this could have been a quick breakout session. And I did not do the math, but I'm going to guess that that was about 14% of you that raised your hand. We all see in the article about 86% of analytics projects fail, and whether you believe that particular number, it's pretty high. And the reason for that is what I call the black hole of analytics value, right? So we all love analytics and we want to be using it as much as possible, but there are so many things that kind of take us down this path of reducing the opportunity for us to realize real, tangible value that we can quantify. So why does that happen? So first off, data is everywhere, right? We are collecting data right now. My watch is collecting data on me right now. If you guys have a Fitbit, we've got data going on, collecting in every conceivable fashion. Organizations are collecting data when we're surfing the web, when we're on our website, when we're in their store. We've got cameras everywhere, data. Almost every organization is constantly collecting data, so we do have an abundance of data, but the value from that data is still scarce. So as we're doing that, there's lots of reasons why organizations are struggling to convert that to value. And I'm going to go through a couple of those right now, but one of the biggest, and it's interesting that Ryan was just talking about flights, right? Everybody here, raise your hand if you are in either a growing or mature business, right? Or even declining, if you're currently operating. That's most of us, right? There might be somebody here who's a startup, who's in stealth mode, pre-launch. So for you guys, this doesn't really apply. For anyone else, if your business is operating, right, it's kind of like fixing the plane while we're flying, right? So we have to transform, like the business doesn't stop. So we have to transform while operating. So what that means, what's going on? Our priorities are changing, our customers are changing, right? Technology is changing, and we're all trying to transform at the same time. So when we talk about this black hole, there's a few mistakes that organizations typically make that is preventing them from moving forward and gaining value. The first one is force-fitting a solution, because oftentimes your CEO or executive said something, perhaps to the board of directors or on an earnings call, such as, we are doing a ton of machine learning, or we've implemented Gen AI everywhere, and then they turn to their data science team and they say, what is Gen AI? And are we actually using it? By the way, go find some projects and go implement ChatGPT, because that's the only thing I actually know about, right? So they're force-fitting a solution that is technically elegant and capable and so forth, but they're trying to find places for that. I was at a conference recently back in, I'm from Columbus, Ohio. I was back at Columbus, and the CIO of an organization, she was standing up in front of the room talking to us, and she said, we're looking for Gen AI use cases. And this was an audience of, executives and analytics leaders, and she asked, tell me what use cases we should be looking at in my organization to get value from Gen AI. And I spoke to her at the end and I said, you're asking the wrong question to the wrong audience, right? You shouldn't be asking a room like this or like that. You should be asking your business, right? What problems do you guys need solved? And you shouldn't be asking, where do we find Gen AI use cases? You should be trying to find the right tool to solve that problem. Sometimes it is Gen AI. Ryan had a nice picture, everybody took a picture of that, it had generative AI, then deep learning, machine learning, analytics. There's another box that goes around that he didn't have, which is called math. And there's another box around that, which is just people. I was telling the story last night at the speaker dinner about one of the projects that I got the most credit for being amazing, when literally all I did was introduce 2 people. And the fact that 2 people got connected, the VP of that area said, Dave, you're amazing. How did you solve that problem? I said, well, I just introduced these 2 guys. Like, they just didn't know each other, and they sat 100 feet apart. So you don't always have to be complex to solve a problem. Has anybody heard of the KISS principle? Not the band, love the band, but KISS, keep it simple, stupid, right? So you don't prove how smart you are by fitting a complex solution into a problem. You keep it as simple as you can. So another reason that we fall into this black hole of analytics value is leaders, we come with our own biases, right? We have a preconceived notion of what we want the answer to be, and then we say, go build a model, build an algorithm that gives me this exact answer that I'm looking for. Back when I used to work at Nationwide, we were working with the chief marketing officer, and he had 4 different defined sets of customers that he wanted all the data segmented into. And he said, can we run some analysis and do some clustering and this and that? And he didn't know what all the methods were, but I want one group to be, age 21 to 34 men that are single with an income of this. I want this other group to be exactly this, and so forth. I said, that's not really analytics. We're not really doing anything. We're just kind of like sorting, right? We're taking your customers, okay, you go in bucket 1, you go in bucket 2, right? That's just a sorting exercise. But he had these preconceived notions, and when we bring our biases and preconceived answers and we're just looking for the data or the insights to support it, we're not really getting value. The last thing that often happens with organizations who aren't gaining value is failing to establish ownership in what the solution is, and so it's sort of that last mile of deployment. We've built a model, we've got all this great data, we've got outstanding insights, and we try to operationalize it, and we hand it over to the people in the organization, and they've not seen it before. Or they don't understand why you're solving this problem. Or they don't understand, it's not intuitive to the end user, or it doesn't work within their workflow. So you've done a lot of great work, and we actually can't use it in practice because it's not practical, and it doesn't fit into that deployment model. So there's lots of these different reasons why we have really good analytics, really good models, but there really isn't value actually coming from it. So I want you guys to raise your hand or I'm going to do a little bit of audience participation here. How many of you are currently in your organization undergoing a transformation? Okay, so that's pretty much everybody. So what do you guys think is if we have 3 choices, I'm going to give you 3 choices. What is the hardest part of transformation? Is it the technology, the process, or the people? How many people, who thinks it is technology? The hardest part. Okay, good answer. How many people think it's process? Got a couple of hands. The rest of you think it's people? Absolutely. So what happens, right? And so why are people the problem? Well, one, I talked about this a little bit on the prior slide, we have goals and ambitions as individuals. We are incented on, our behavior rather mimics how we are incented. So when I talk about that executive who said, hey, we're using Gen AI, we're using machine learning, go find all these use cases, right? And essentially, we're that Gen AI hammer looking for nails. Well, why did they say that? Well, because the street wanted to hear it. Their stock price went up because they said it. Now they need to fulfill it. And oh, by the way, they have short-term and long-term incentives. And so that's what they want to do. So we have this idea that we have to do this. We also look at our competitors and we say, well, if we're not doing it, well, what are they doing? They must be doing something because their CEO put out the same directive, right? So they're really not doing it, but their guy said it. So we have to do this. Somebody ever heard of the Me Too strategy? Right? We better do it because they're doing it. And like, well, they're not actually doing it. I heard somebody in a talk one time said it was kind of like high school sex, right? It's the Me Too strategy. Well, everyone's saying they're doing it, so I have to say I'm doing it too, and in reality, nobody's doing it. But you have this approach, you're like, I have to do this because they're all doing it, and you don't look at yourself. So when you start looking at other organizations, and even if they actually are doing it and say, well, they're doing it, therefore we should do what they do, you're not looking at yourself internally, you're not looking at your organization, you're not thinking about your customers, you've got this Me Too strategy. So that hurts. The second thing, and too often we see this happening, in a transformation, organizations prioritize short-term over long-term. So when I hear the word strategy, when I hear the word transformation, I always think long-term. These are big transformations. They don't happen overnight. This isn't a week-to-week proposition. And too often, we make decisions, we in organizations who don't see value, we prioritize the short term. And why do we prioritize short term? Again, going back to our incentives, right? Our monthly results, our quarterly results. We can't afford to take the individuals out of our organization who are operating and put them on this project because we need them running the business. So when we get to this fork in the road, we tend to go right. And often, especially in certain industries, a lot of people don't necessarily know if you're going to be around for the long term, right? There's a lot of turnover, especially higher up executives. In my former world in retail, it seemed like every week somebody was getting provided the opportunity to spend more time with their family. The announcement goes. But when you do that, you don't give yourself the opportunity to really invest in yourself and have that long-term viewpoint. The last thing, and I'm going to talk a lot more about this as we talk about the topic for this talk, which is the analytics-informed path. I'm sure we've all heard the term data-driven and analytics-driven. I'm not a fan of that term. I don't like analytics personally being in the driver's seat. I like it being in the passenger seat. And too often we give analytics first, and analytics is driving where we go as an analytics strategy or an AI strategy. Really, to me, analytics, as Chris said in my open, it's an enabler. It is not the reason that we do things. So I always look for our transformations to be informed and enabled by analytics. I'm actually a huge believer that you don't need an analytics strategy and you don't need an AI strategy. You need a business strategy that is informed, measured, and enabled by analytics. And you're doing analytics to achieve a particular goal for your product, for your service, for your customer, for your employees, what you're trying to achieve. Analytics is a great way to get there, but it's not an analytics strategy just for the sake of doing analytics. So we're going to move on to the next slide. And this is one of my favorite slides that if anyone has seen me speak before, you've seen this one multiple times. This is, I call this my decision modeling approach, but it's also the analytics informed path. Where are we trying to get to? Bottom right? We all want value. And so if we start up, is anybody old enough to remember Carly Fiorina back when she was the leader at HP, and she said the goal of analytics, she was one of the first people who said this, the goal is to take data, turn that into information, and then turn those into insights. And that's kind of interesting, but insights are only interesting. It's kind of like cocktail party conversation, or maybe Snapple puts them on the bottom of their lids, right? Because what we're missing is action, right, or a decision. So when you think about the analytics informed path, we've got our data, right? All these atomic level data elements that we're gathering from all kinds of sources, internal, external, you name it. We start to coalesce that together, we create the context around that, and we have information. Now we start to put the models together, and we either, we run a regression, we do some machine learning, we find correlations, all that kind of stuff. And then we have insights, and the insights have to be actionable. And I'll tell you a story back from 2014. I was working with a client, Designer Brands, formerly at DSW. And I was working with their CIO, and I asked him what he was working on. He said, oh, we have this great project. We just hired this consultant. They're going to take all of our POS data from in the store, and they're going to take all of our internet data from our online sales, and they're going to tell us what they find. I said, okay, cool. How much did you pay for that? And he said, about $50,000. I said, damn, you could have given me $25,000, saved yourself $25K, and I will give you the exact same interesting insights that they will give, and they would just be interesting. And so what happened, they came back and they said, well, we realized that women who typically bought Steve Madden shoes on a Thursday were often on the website the prior Tuesday. Interesting, right? And all these just interesting, nothing was actionable. There was no problem to be solved, no decision to be made. And that's the key to this analytics informed path, is you actually start here with step 4, right? We don't just go left to right. You start with the action or the decision that we need to make, and then you work backwards. And you say, what are the insights we need to inform that action? What are the information strings we need to feed the models to get those insights and the atomic level data elements? By the way, if anybody is involved in data governance, one of the coolest byproducts of this kind of an approach is you can implement differentiated levels of data governance. So don't govern all of your data the same. Govern the data that drives critical decisions highly. If you have data that doesn't touch any decisions, don't govern it, okay? But the analytics informed path, as we move back here, you'll see we have insights. And I apologize, it's a little bit out of focus here, but we've got intuition. Another word for intuition is experience, right? Context, it's the human element. This is always insight plus intuition, or another way to say it is data plus gut. When you use both inputs, there's few guarantees in life, but when you use both inputs, I guarantee you that you will make a better informed decision, no matter what your decision is. It might not always be right? Because life happens, and sometimes we make a decision, right? The probabilities, everything's in our favor, and the long shot turns out. But when you use data plus gut, you make a better decision than just using data alone, and you make a better decision than just using gut alone. So when you do that, and you apply that to an action or a decision, you have the highest probability of actually achieving value, because your key decision maker, your business partner, has told you, this is a decision that I care about, that's very meaningful to business, I need increased confidence, and by the way, that reason I need increased confidence, or what I wish I knew, that's the insight, right? That's the roadmap to building your strategy. So when you do this analytics informed path, right, we've got the direct line, but it's informed because we have that intuition, we have that human element that is still in here. This, by the way, is another great way. Ryan and I also talked a little bit about responsible AI. This is another way to ensure responsible decision making. It's not just the analytics made the decision or the data did it. Has anybody ever been in a room where somebody's explaining the decision and they say, well, the data told me to do it, right? Or the analytics said that we should do this. Well, guess what? The analytics didn't say we should do it. The data didn't tell you to do it. There's a human being who is making the decision. So responsible AI says, understand this, understand that flow of data information, understand the algorithm, add context, add your experience, insight plus intuition, take action, you're gonna have a better decision. Again, no guarantees it'll turn out, but you're gonna definitely make a better decision. So I'm gonna leave you guys with 5 takeaways as we talk here about using this analytics informed path. There's 5 things I really want you guys to take away. Know where you're going. When you're doing a business transformation, I want you to have a target. So a lot of people said that you're involved currently in a business transformation. So I want to take 1 second, maybe just pair off the person next to you and tell the person next to you a clear goal that your organization has. Just take 1 second and talk to the person next to you and share a goal.
Yeah, kind of similar.
We aim to strive for that. So raise your hand if it was not smart, right? If it was a little bit high level, right? Yeah. So this is what, one of the great quotes here by Lewis Carroll. If you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. Since it's baseball season, playoffs, apologies to any Yankees fans who saw them get eliminated last night. This is probably the most enjoyable quote machine in the history of the world, Yogi Berra. If you don't know where you're going, you might end up someplace else. So I like his take on it a little bit better. But when you think about those high-level goals, right? We aim to be best in class in customer service, or we need to improve this process, or we need to do better at that. Those things are great for mission statements, right? If you want to guide the organization, like why do we exist? But when you're talking about a transformation, we have to have that SMART goal. We are going to reduce defects by 10%, on this product line within 60 days or whatever it is. You need to have that, and so many organizations don't actually do that. So what happens is you start down this path and you don't know where you're going, you don't know why you're going, you don't get buy-in, and we don't know how to measure whether or not we succeeded. So we've done a lot of activity. I want to go back to that metric at the beginning, 86% of projects fail. Well, when you get to the end of it and you say, well, did the project produce value? Like, I don't know. How are we going to measure it? We didn't think about that, right? We're just doing stuff, and so that's how you fall into that 86%. So when you're doing a transformation, whether it's analytics informed or anything, make sure you know what the goals are and time box them. As a consultant, I'm a huge fan of, and I've since probably 2021, I have not done a project longer than 90 days. And I love that. Now, again, I just said earlier, transformations are long-term things. But when I look at a 90-day view, I can look at my client, we can talk, and we can say, here's what we're going to achieve, and here's how we're going to measure it. And we have a high probability that we know what we're going to be able to get done. And the pace of change, or what is actually different in those 90 days, is a lot smaller and manageable. It still allows us to actually achieve something, right? You don't want to make it 1 week because you're really not going to get too much done. But in 90 days, you can assess, you can have a goal, you can get there, and then guess what you do at the end of 90 days? Do we sign up for another 90 days? And then do we sign up for another 90 days after that? And that's how I've operated for the last 5 years from a consulting standpoint, as opposed to before that, I used to sign up for year-long projects. or this is this big transformation and we're gonna do it, it's a year and a half, or it's an ERP implementation, or it's this or that. And when you get so far, so many variables are changing, again, as you're flying the plane, but you go back to the beginning and say, well, here's what we decided to do. We're now a year down the road, we're still doing what we said back here. Well, that's what we agreed to, but so much has changed. So I'm a huge, huge fan of shrinking those timelines, making sure you know where you're going. I was talking a little bit with you before, I'm sorry I didn't catch your name.
Mackenzie.
Mackenzie, she was the first one in the room, so Mackenzie gets my gold star for the day. And she was talking about her new job and how she was really appreciative that her organization values their people. So the key takeaway number 2, invest in your people. People are the lifeblood of your organization. Again, raise your hand. How many people have an organization where you've heard somebody in HR, your CEO or whomever has said, our people are our greatest asset? Right? Ever heard that before? We are going to put our best and our brightest on this project, right? They often don't necessarily do that. People are just so important because as human beings, we have skills, we have capabilities, we exemplify leadership, we can inspire, we can encourage, we bring an attitude, we bring culture and connection to the organization. When you do that, when you collaborate, you invest in your people, both in skill upbuilding is one thing, so there's lots of things we can teach, right? Go out and do some Coursera, go somewhere else, learn a technology, coding, etc. We can invest in cross-functional experience. Cross-functional experience is so unbelievably important. So if you're in IT, get a job in finance and then rotate into marketing, rotate into operations, go into supply chain. Put on, walk in the shoes of the other person, understand what they go through. It will be eye-opening for you. You can come back to your chosen functional area later, but having that breadth of experience will be phenomenal. If there's anybody who likes reading, there's a fantastic book called Range by David Epstein. Highly recommend it. And it talks about the value that you get by working in very different disciplines that makes you better at your own chosen discipline when you get back. So I can't tell that one strongly enough. I'll tell another quick story which was interesting. This is also back when I was working at DSW. I was talking with the marketing team, and they decided that they were going to run, this is back when shipping online always had a fee. Right now we're so used to free shipping everywhere, but they decided they were going to drive sales. They said, we're going to have a free shipping weekend. It's going to be fantastic. Guess who they told? Nobody outside marketing. Any problems with that? Also, random Friday, I think it was in April. All of a sudden, in the distribution center, they got an order, and I'm like, oh, we had an order. And then another one came in, and another one came in, and another one came in, and all of a sudden, they had holiday-like volumes on a random weekend in April. They knew something was wrong. This isn't real. Like, we can't be having this much going on because nobody knew that there was this promotion going on. So the folks in marketing didn't have that cross-functional understanding, didn't understand what their colleagues one step down in that value chain, what impacted their world, because they'd only ever worked in marketing, right? And so when you think about that, if you work in marketing and you work in operations and you work in finance, you start to understand the interdependencies. You understand what the other folks are going through. It really leads to better outcomes, and you'll be a better, more broader, capable person. The next thing I want to talk to you guys about is connection. When you're investing with your people, connecting with individuals is huge. When I was at Nationwide back in 2012, we did a survey where all of your employees got to rate you. So I had about 8 or 9 direct reports, and I think the scale was like 1 to 5, so 5 was great. 8 of my direct reports gave me 4s and 5s, and it's really good. This one guy gave me 1s all across the board. And I said, wow, that was interesting, like why did we do that? So I had a conversation with him, and he said, Dave, you are the most inefficient, worst manager I've ever seen. Every single meeting we go into, you ask Ben about his kids, right? You ask Mackenzie about her new job. You ask Kevin about his weekend and where he traveled and about his wife and this and that. You waste 15, 20 minutes every single meeting. God, we could get so much more done if you would just get down to business. And he didn't understand what I was doing. And so I want to play you guys a short clip from an amazing movie. Anybody a fan of Remember the Titans?
Yeah.
Okay. So we're gonna watch this clip real quick. And this is about creating connection.
I want you to tell me something about one of your black evenings.
Sure, yes, sir. I roll with the blue, sir, and I noticed that he wears those leopard spotted underwear. Easy job, sir.
Okay, maybe somebody who's not doing it.
Sir, I eat lunch with Brett. That's Sherry Harris, sir. Keep going, Brett, because he's only praying he won't back fouled up, sir.
And what does the rep want to do after high school?
I don't know. Go to college and all that, I guess.
What about you? You go to college?
Oh, not me, Coach. I'm a brainiac like Brett.
Think you got a future in football?
Oh, heck no. I just figured if I got to be in school, I might as well hit some people on that.
Oh, I like that. A self-aware man, I like that.
But if you don't go to college, it's not going to be because you're not qualified. I want you to bring me to this school and interview me and go and get okay. Keep it between me. Sure.
So what kind of music does the rep?
Oh, yeah, we got both things on the Temptation.
Oh, yeah.
I know you want to leave me, but I refuse to let you go. If I got to pray, please, for your sympathy, I don't mind, 'cause you mean that much to me. Ain't you got a day?
Hey. Anybody else? No volunteers? Campbell? Bertier? No, huh? Each one of you will spend time every day with a teammate of a different race. You will learn about him and his family, his likes, his dislikes. You will report back to me until you meet every one of your teammates. And until that time, you go to 3-a-day practice. You continue to ignore each other, we'll go to 4-day practice. Now, is there any part of this that you don't?
So, for those that haven't seen this, is Remember the Titans. In the South, in the 60s, Denzel Washington is the new head football coach. And of course, the white players don't like the black players. They don't want to talk to each other. He's trying to create connection, right? And so it's not just, hey, we're on the same football team. But when you get that connection, when you know that you both like the Temptations, when you know something about the family, when you know about the common interests, you create connection with people. We can create connection, and all of us are connected here in this room to the University of Cincinnati in some way. A lot of us like the same sports team. A lot of us have kids that are into the same thing, or we have the same hobbies. When you create connection with your team, you will enjoy work more. And if you're a people leader, your team will enjoy work more. They will work harder. It will lead to more increased retention. It is the most powerful thing that I think a leader can do, is creating connection. And that is why people are the most important part of your organization. And when you have that connection, one of the things that you earn is the ability to make mistakes. We're all going to make mistakes. When you make a mistake with somebody you have a really strong connection with, you get the opportunity to say, hey, I screwed up. I know that negatively impacted you. I'm sorry. Let's move on. Let's debrief. Let's figure this thing out. But don't forget, invest in your people. Invest in creating connection. It's so important. The next thing, as again, we're going through transformation, is we have to manage costs. Raise your hand if you've ever worked on a transformation and your CFO or your finance organization has told you have a completely unlimited budget and the dollars don't matter. That doesn't work? Of course not. Anybody ever been a part of a project where maybe midway through you got the notice, hey guys, project is canceled, we lost the budget. Right? That's happened to me a few times, right? So you really have to manage your costs, and I think manage your costs with purpose. Know how deep your pockets are, right? We probably have a couple billion-dollar companies in the room. We probably have a couple $500 million companies. maybe a few $10 million companies, in terms of revenue in the room. Pockets are different depths, right? So we're all going through transformation. Know how deep your pockets are, know what you can spend, know what you can and can't do, and figure out how to do that. Now, transformation, I want to be clear, is not cost cutting. So transformation is not strategic sourcing. If there's any strategic sourcing folks in the room, right, finding a commodity, like say Starbucks wants to buy these sleeves, right, we can get them for 3 cents instead of 5 cents, fantastic. Strategic sourcing, love it on commodities. That's not business transformation, that's saving money, really, really important. But when you're spending your dollars, most of the time we have limited budgets, so we have to spend it wisely and do it with purpose. If you've ever been on a project that has lasted more than 3 or 4 months, anybody want to take a guess what typically happens to the expenses on that project? There's one hint. There's another hint, right? Costs always go up. Whatever we estimated, right, whatever we put in the project approval for the business case, it's always more expensive. It always happens that way. So manage our costs with purpose. A sidelight to that is manage your timeline with purpose, right? So again, we put together this project. We're going to get this done in 6 months, right? We're going to take from January to June and get this done. Anybody want to take a guess what typically happens to these timelines in major transformations? Oh, hey, look at that. We're in December now. We just doubled the timeline. And again, why does that happen? Because business doesn't stop. Customers doesn't stop. Technology doesn't stop. Things change that we did not anticipate. In this example, back the prior October, November, when we were planning this whole thing out, right? The plan was perfect. Has anybody ever heard the famous Mike Tyson quote, right? Everything is perfect until you get punched in the face, right? You always get punched in the face. Every project I've ever been on, the project plan was absolutely perfect on day 0. You get everything, and then it goes on. And that's actually, if anybody's a project manager in the room, that's part of the reason that we have experienced quality project managers. They know how to manage all those changes. Because on day 2, that project plan is usually out the window and there's adjustments. I always like to use the analogy, right? If you drive to work, every day you know the right path to drive to work, but you are constantly adjusting. You're changing your speed, sometimes you get stuck at a light, sometimes there's an accident. You're always adjusting. Even though you know where you're going every single day, sometimes it takes 10 minutes, sometimes it takes 20 minutes. You always have to adjust. And when you manage your cost and your timeline, it's really important. In fact, that led to one of my great projects that I really enjoyed. I worked a long time at Limited Brands, and we had this 3-year, $300 million project that turned into a 7-year, $1 billion project. So the CFO, the former CFO of Victoria's Secret, she went to Polo Ralph Lauren, she hired me, and she said, Dave, you have one job. Our project is 3 years and $300 million. It's the exact same project we just did at Limited Brands. Your job is to keep it there. That was my entire job description. And I said, well, you know what's going to happen in most cases, the costs are going to double, the timeline's going to double, and the benefits are going to get cut in half. I said, I know. Your job is to make sure that doesn't happen. But that's simply what happens. Again, you get these big long projects. Again, that's why I go back to shortening up that time frame. 90-day, again, I can't tell you how much I love 90-day projects. Key takeaway number 4, Chris talked about it a little bit in my introduction. Know your role, right? Can't avoid an opportunity, can't bypass rather an opportunity to put the rock in a presentation. Some people do think we look alike, maybe just from the neck up. That's probably only similarities there. But when you think about analytics, right, like this goes back to analytics being the driver. Analytics should not be driving. Analytics has 3 superpowers. The superpowers that it has is it can inform, right? We can put all this data together, we can run models, and we can show answers and say, look, this is what's going on, this is a correlation, this is a prediction, this is a confidence level, all this stuff. It can inform, it can measure, and then especially when we start talking about machine learning, we start talking about generative AI and other capabilities, it can actually enable us. But it is about doing those 3 things. Analytics should not and does not drive. Analytics does not make decisions. Analytics does not tell you what to do. It is there as a support mechanism. And too often, again, we see analytics falling into the driver's seat. Is anybody familiar with RACI models? Right, this is an example of where I see the role of analytics. You'll notice, with the project manager and the team lead and so forth, analytics is not responsible for anything. The person is responsible for something. Analytics is not accountable. An individual person is accountable. Analytics is not consulted, right? Nor is analytics informed, right? Analytics informs. So when you do the RACI model, if you ever have one, analytics pretty much has a blank slate, right? It's when all these other people are using it, the person who is accountable or responsible, or when you are consulting with somebody, you can use analytics to help consult or use your analytics to inform them. But again, when you've got a RACI model, analytics does not have it on there. Analytics is not a live being. Again, it goes back to people. Human beings are the ones doing these things. This is a great quote from Kevin Kelly from Wired Magazine. Technology is always in the process of becoming. Everything is always becoming, going from might to is. Everything is in flux. Nothing is finished. Nothing is done. I always think about this as the analogy of fitness. Right? Has anybody ever tried to lose weight or get a little bit fit? It's like, great, you get fit, you lose weight, but what happens? You don't just stop. What happens is you get unfit or you gain weight back, right? It's a constant process. It's always something that's going on. So when we're talking about transformation, there's no finish line. Because again, the dynamics around us are always changing. One of the best organizations that I've been around that really tackles this problem well is Nationwide Insurance. When we were there was such structure. I was leading the finance IT organization. Every IT organization had a 5-year plan. And I love these 5-year plans that they developed. Year one, very detailed. We know the projects we're going to do, we know the outcomes, we know the budgets and all that good stuff. Year two, fairly well defined, right? But we saw a little bit of wiggle room, maybe not that the entire budget is accounted for, pretty clear what we're going to do. Year 3 and year 4, pretty high level. Year 5, super high level, right? But we know what's going on. And what do we do at the end of each year? Year 2 becomes year 1, year 3 becomes year 2, and so when we have a new year 5. We're constantly, there's always an active 5-year plan, right? A lot of detail in the short term. As you go further out, less detail. But we know where we're going, and we know that there's no end in sight, right? And you've got to keep that in mind as a leader. It's always, always evolving. So we just got to flag that we have about 10 minutes left. I think we actually have time to run through both of these. So I have a couple of case studies to share with you, a couple of organizations, one that did it really well and one that did it not so well. So one of the ones that does it really, does anybody work for Target in the room? Anybody shop at Target, love Target? Target's fantastic, right? Target did a phenomenal job when they were looking at their assortment. So if you're not familiar with retail, the assortment is basically what's in the store, right? Which products are available in the store. And Target, like many retailers, it started off where every store had the exact same stuff. And they said, well, that doesn't seem to be optimal because buying patterns are different in warm weather states versus cold weather states, East Coast, West Coast, etc. And they started to collect the data. They started looking at buying patterns, looking at customer, and they started to change their assortment and make their assortment match what their customer base was actually buying. It led to fewer out of stocks. It led to fewer red lines, right? So if you have a lot of swimwear up in Minnesota, right, in the winter, nobody's buying that, right? So it had the right product in the right place, and they were using it really great. This is a multi-year transformation. This was not something they did overnight, but they used data to inform. They had a problem they wanted to solve that people cared about, and they used data analytics extensively to do that. An example of an organization who didn't do that well, and this is about letting analytics being in the driver's seat, JCPenney. So a while ago, they were led by a guy who used to work at Apple, Ron Johnson. And he came in and essentially he said, we're running too many sales. We have too many coupons. It's really affecting our pricing strategy. We need to change all this up. People are confused, and we need to optimize